My parents called my wedding a little party, until my father's billionaire boss walked into our cheap backyard venue and dropped to one knee before my groom. My mother had spent the last 6 months mocking our lack of a budget, sneering that a registry office and a tent on a rented lawn was all a nobody like Leo deserved. My father even refused to walk me down the aisle, terrified of wasting his precious weekend. They arrived late, dressed in casual clothes, deliberately trying to embarrass us in front of our few guests. But the smug smirks vanished from their faces the exact second a sleek black limousine pulled up by the grass. When the CEO of my father's multinational company stepped out, my father practically tripped over himself to grovel. But his boss ignored him completely, walked right past my parents, and panicked. My name is Chloe, and at 26 years old, I had long since accepted my role as the official black sheep of the family. My parents operated under a strict currency of status, designer labels, and social climbing, which made my older brother, Julian, their undisputed golden child. Julian was a corporate ladder climber who married into old money, while I was the daughter who preferred working at a local nonprofit and buying thrift store books. But the real divide happened the day I brought Liam home. I met Liam at a local dog rescue, where I volunteered. He was kind, incredibly humble, and possessed a quiet confidence that didn't require shouting. He drove a rusted, beat-up sedan, wore faded flannel shirts, and talked passionately about simple things like hiking and astronomy. To my parents, he was an absolute nobody. The first time they met him, my father barely looked up from his phone, and my mother openly sighed at his lack of a corporate pedigree. During that excruciating dinner, Julian spent an hour bragging about his new sports car, while my father threw passive-aggressive jabs at Liam, asking if he ever planned on getting a real job instead of working freelance IT. Liam just smiled gently, completely unbothered by the hostility, and squeezed my hand under the table. I loved him for his peace, but my family only saw a target. They truly believed I was throwing my life away on a penniless stranger. When Liam and I finally announced our engagement, my parents didn't celebrate. They looked at me with pure secondhand embarrassment. My mother put her wine glass down with a heavy thud, took a long look at my modest, vintage engagement ring, and asked, "Are you seriously going through with this, Chloe?" My father didn't even congratulate us. Instead, he laid down a brutal, icy ultimatum right there at the dining table. "If you marry this penniless nobody, do not expect a single dime from us. We refuse to fund a low-class affair that embarrasses our family name. Call it off, or you are completely on your own." I remember running out to Liam's beat-up car that night, hot tears streaming down my face. I felt so small, so deeply rejected by the people who were supposed to love me. I told Liam through my sobs that we didn't have to do a big wedding, that we could just elope because my family was going to make the planning a living nightmare. But Liam just pulled me into a warm embrace, brushing the tears from my cheeks with a quiet, unshakable calm. He looked deeply into my eyes and said, "Chloe, a budget doesn't define our love. Let them keep their money, and let them have their pride. It's truly all they have. We're going to have a beautiful day, just you and me." His voice was so steady, so full of peace, that the weight in my chest instantly lifted. Still, as he stared past me at my parents' pristine, expensive house, a strange, knowing flicker crossed his face, a look I didn't quite understand at the time. He wasn't angry, he just looked incredibly patient. The morning of our wedding arrived, and we gathered at a small, rented pavilion in a public park nearby. It was modest, decorated with fairy lights and wild roses we had picked ourselves, but to me, it was absolutely perfect. That was until my family arrived. True to form, my parents and Julian showed up notoriously late, intentionally disrupting the quiet ceremony. They strutted down the grass pathway dressed in over-the-top designer outfits, looking less like wedding guests and more like judges at a high society auction. The moment the ceremony ended and the casual reception began, the whispers started. My father walked up to the buffet table, loudly poking at the simple finger foods we had ordered from a local bakery. "What a pathetic little party," he said, making sure his voice carried across the lawn so our friends could hear. My mother openly sneered at my off-brand dress, while Julian joked to his wife about the lack of an open top-shelf bar. They stood in a tight circle, holding themselves like captive royalty trapped in a slum, entirely apathetic to my happiness. I felt a familiar burning sensation in my throat, the old urge to hide away and cry. But when I looked over at Liam, he wasn't flustered at all. He stood by the punch bowl, looking sharp in his simple suit, casually sipping his drink. He caught my eye and flashed a reassuring, brilliant smile, completely unfazed by their toxic energy. It was as if he knew a secret that stripped them of all their power. He walked over, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Don't worry, honey. The real party hasn't even started yet." Just as the tension under the pavilion was becoming unbearable, a sudden, heavy, low rumble echoed across the quiet park. Everyone stopped talking and turned toward the narrow gravel entrance. A sleek, flawless convoy of 3 massive, jet-black SUVs pulled up to our humble rented pavilion, kicking up small clouds of dust. The vehicles looked like they belonged to a high-ranking government official or a visiting foreign diplomat, completely out of place in our simple setting. The doors flew open, and several burly men in earpieces stepped out, instantly scanning the area before one of them opened the rear passenger door. A man in his late 50s stepped out onto the grass, wearing a perfectly tailored, charcoal gray bespoke suit that practically screamed old money and absolute authority. My father's jaw dropped so low, I thought it would hit the wooden floorboards of the pavilion. The color instantly drained from his face, and he gripped his wine glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. It was Mr. Arthur Vance, the reclusive, fiercely intimidating billionaire founder and CEO of the global tech conglomerate where my father had desperately spent the last 10 years trying to get a single promotion. Mr. Vance never attended public events, let alone casual park gatherings. My father immediately assumed the billionaire must be lost, perhaps looking for a high-profile corporate retreat nearby. Smelling a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to finally get noticed, my father quickly smoothed down his expensive tie, plastered a desperate, sycophantic smile across his face, and began pushing past the confused guests to intercept his boss. "Mr. Vance," my father called out, his voice practically dripping with desperate flattery as he hurried across the grass. "What an incredible honor, sir. You must be looking for the country club down the road. Allow me to personally guide you away from this modest little gathering." My father gestured vaguely back toward our pavilion, his face flushed with a mixture of corporate ambition and deep embarrassment that his billionaire boss was witnessing his daughter's cheap wedding. But Mr. Vance didn't look at the country club, and he completely ignored my father's extended hand. He brushed right past him without a word, his sharp eyes scanning the small crowd before locking onto the punch bowl. My father stood frozen as Mr. Vance walked straight up to Liam, stopped, and dropped into a deeply respectful bow. The entire park went dead silent. "Sir, we've been looking for you everywhere," Mr. Vance said, his powerful voice echoing across the lawn. "Your phone was off. Your grandfather was worried you wouldn't make the board meeting tomorrow." Liam sighed gently, setting his paper cup down. "I told you, Arthur, I wanted a quiet day. I'm getting married." My brother Julian gasped, and my mother looked as if she might faint. The truth exploded into the open like a bomb. The man my family had spent months humiliating, the penniless nobody driving the rusted sedan, was actually William Vance II. He was the sole heir to the entire multi-billion-dollar global empire, a man who had chosen to live a completely humble life just to find a genuine partner who loved him for exactly who he was. The power dynamic in that park completely flipped in a single second. My father stood paralyzed, his chest heaving as the horrifying reality set in. He had spent the last several months relentlessly mocking and insulting the one man who literally owned his entire livelihood. Julian's smug expression vanished, his precious corporate connections instantly evaporating into thin air. Suddenly, my mother broke the stunned silence. She let out a high-pitched, frantic gasp, forced a bright, desperate smile onto her face, and rushed toward us. "Oh, Liam, William, we always knew there was something uniquely special about you," she cried, her voice practically dripping with synthetic affection. My father quickly snapped out of his trance, nodding vigorously as he tried to elbow his way back into the circle. Yes. A toast to the groom. Chloe, darling, you know we were only joking about the party. We are just so incredibly proud of our beautiful daughter. They actually had the audacity to reach out to hug me, desperately trying to rewrite months of cruelty right in front of a billionaire witness. But before they could even step close, Liam calmly stepped in front of me, his gentle eyes turning to absolute ice. The warmth they were trying so hard to manufacture died right in the air. That's enough, Liam said, his voice quiet but carrying the heavy, undeniable authority of a man who could ruin them with a phone call. He looked at my parents, then at Julian, and delivered the final blow. Your invitation to our wedding and to our lives has officially expired. Please leave my wife's party. The fallout was swift and absolute. Within a week, my father was reassigned to a remote, windowless branch office before being unceremoniously let go, the company citing a restructuring of leadership. My brother's high-stakes career stalled instantly as the word of their behavior at the wedding rippled through their social circles like wildfire. Their house, their status, and their arrogance were quickly dismantled by the very hubris they had championed. They were left with nothing but the silence of their own empty ambitions. Liam and I moved into a life that was both grand and remarkably grounded. We have our luxury, but more importantly, we have a foundation built on respect and genuine love. Looking back, I don't harbor resentment. The memory of their faces when they realized who Liam was is far too satisfying for that. I simply learned that your real worth is never determined by those who fail to see it. Now, I'm curious about you, the ones listening to my story. Would you have forgiven your family after such a public humiliation, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Comment your thoughts and the city you are watching from below.